everyone, and welcome to the Babylon Chronicles, a podcast dedicated to taking a look at the inner workings, discussions, and shenanigans involved with making one of the world's most powerful, beautiful, simple, and open web rendering engines, Babylon.js. My name is Jason Carter, also known as Pirate JC, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, David Katui, Mr. Delta Kosh.
Delta Kosh, right, I'm here.
And we have a very, very special guest this week, Sebastien Vandenberghe, also known on the forum as
Sebavan. Nice to meet you, everyone.
Oh, Sebavan.
Sebavan. You have the two.
You are kind of famous in the Babylon forum circles. If people have ever used Babylon, you have helped them. It's pretty much a guarantee.
Or deferred to somebody else to help.
So, Seb, you have a very, very interesting and distinct honor. As we've talked about on this podcast before, David originally created Babylon as kind of a side project at Microsoft. And then we told the story of how it kind of became they asked you to work on it full time. David became kind of a core part of our technology platform here at Microsoft. But Seb, you were actually one of the first people to come work on it full time alongside David. Is that correct?
Let me even go further than that.
Great.
So Babylon.js was a side project. I was working on it on my spare time-ish, right? Like I was an evangelist on Edge, so I had time to work on that. But the real moment where we move from a side project to a officially Microsoft-supported project, it's all about Seb. So I will let him tell that story, but it's all about Seb.
Hey, Seb, what do you got?
Which is pretty fun because I was at this time doing services work for Xbox games, which has nothing to do with 3D at all. So, yeah, it was back in London, and we were doing games. I was interested in front end, but doing lots of web.
Right? 2018, right?
It was even before this when I started on it. I think it was 2015 or something like this when I was doing the game services, doing asset management for game, basically, for all the meshes and so on. And I wanted to add on a backend management tool some 3D rendering of the meshes people were using in Unity.
So they could see them. So,
exactly.
So the idea being you're an Xbox studio and you have a collection of assets and you want to be able to see them on the web without having to go download the object or whatever.
Exactly, for backend management of the game. And by doing this, I found an amazing project, 3JS. No. Then I looked into it. I found Babylon as well. And what I noticed was Babylon was managed by somebody within Microsoft, which was basically somebody I could reach out as a colleague in order to help me get started with 3D. At this time, I knew nothing about 3D, not even what camera was, meshes, and so on. So for me, it was all like a nice discovery. Ping David at this time as well. And yeah, it was lots of fun starting with it. Years later, what happened is, as usual, we shifted project and so on, and the studio I was in started on Paint 3D and Remix3D.com. Obviously, we need to render object in the web, which is what I was doing in the studio for asset management already.
And quick interjection here. Paint 3D was a new application Microsoft was building that took some of the popularity of Microsoft Paint, which has been around for a long time, but introduced some very easy to use 3D features on top of it, basically.
It's still there, right? You can install it if you go to the Windows Store and you can install Paint 3D.
Yeah.
Yep. And that was fun. So they asked me to help on like making rendering of those 3D objects on the web. So I helped on this, and obviously I was working with David at that time. Funny thing is, I was working during my night in UK and David during his day in US, which was an amazing kind of fit from our working hours. David is a morning person, I'm a night person, so it's just like, oh, yes,
no, and you are not
up?
kidding.
Yes, I'm up.
You are not kidding. Yeah, let maybe open some gate here just to mention that. So we, as at least Jason and I, we are living in the US, in Redmond Bay, so PST. And Seb, you are living in the southeast of France, so it's GMT +1. But because of your, how can I qualify that, way of working, right?
Insanity. Yeah.
Yes,
No, it's
exactly.
different. Like we absorb and accept all differences, of course. Seb start to work when I start to work,
Yeah.
and Seb ends to work after me. So somehow Seb work during nighttime in France, right? Where when it's daytime in the US. So
Right.
Seb seems to be working like if he was my neighbor, and actually he's like 8,000 kilometers away from us.
And so what we've kind of established here at this point is we're pretty sure Seb does not actually sleep.
He does not.
No. Yeah, we
I
can't
do at the
figure out
same
when
time
that
as
would
you.
occur.
I do like
sleep when you sleep.
but you won't notice because you're sleeping as well. So no, it's okay.
So Seb, you grew up in France. You were working in the UK at this time for the games studio, correct? When the
Yes.
shift to Paint 3D and Remix 3D, and this is when you and David started working more closely together.
Yeah, definitely. And I fell in love with like Web 3D in general. I found it like
and me as well. He fell in love with me, and
That's the real. That's
yeah,
the
and
real
it's
Yeah,
exactly
it's
why
yeah.
I decided to move to the US to be
I was
closer
like,
from
"You
David.
cannot hide
Right.
that anymore."
So I found a position in the US at this time, and I started as an evangelist in the US for not that long. To be honest, I was not the
You can
best
say
at being
it was not a
evangelist.
success. It was not a success, right?
Not really, but it gave me a lot of time to create Spector.js because I did it during my time when I was evangelist. And yeah,
So
it's
Spector.js, we have to pause here. Spector.js, if you are into the development of 3D on the web,
Oh, you know it.
Spector.js
it.
is a tool you have to check
Okay.
out. It is not dependent on Babylon. What it does is it allows you to get visual and diagnostic information to exactly what's happening on the GPU through WebGL calls. So it's WebGL, complicated, complex language. To be able to understand how does the GPU render the different pieces through WebGL, this tool is a visualization and debugging tool that allows you to see that. And man, is it incredible. And it's used all over the place, worldwide, right, Seb?
Anywhere.
yes,
All,
yeah,
all our competitors, everyone who is doing WebGL, praise Babylon and Seb for the Spector.js. Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
can't
incredible.
count the number of times.
It's just because I was so bad at doing WebGL, I needed something to help me troubleshoot what I was doing. So
Turns out you just made a tool for yourself that would help a whole bunch of people in this world. So congratulations on that.
yeah, that was a cool
And open
thing.
source. Open source.
And open source.
And
That's right.
It also turned out to be the time where people were still working on Remix 3D in London, and I remember they wanted to move the development team from it was from UK to US or Canada and so on. And at this point, I was discussing with the people responsible of this and be like, why not creating the team here? I mean, and they were like, I'm not sure. We should ask David. Maybe David could come too. They're like, oh yes, that would be a good idea. And it's how the conversation started after
so
with
Seb
David.
Literally created the Babylon team.
So
Because
Seb randomly goes to the decision makers at the time and he says, maybe we should bring David on and we can do Babylon full time. And boom, the Babylon
and
team
then
is
they
born.
yeah, right. That's exactly how it happens. I was not planning to do that full time before Seb was able to unlock stuff in Microsoft
And
complicated
find
and integrated system and figure out a team.
and find
Well,
a
the
new
team
job.
started, it was Seb and I, right? It was literally Seb and I working on it. And Seb was engineer and I was program manager for some reason. I still don't know why. Yeah, it does not make any fucking sense, to be fair with you. But it was, yeah, you have to be program manager because reasons. I was like, okay, well, I will just do development work. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So I will full time develop on Babylon, but you're going to call me a PM.
You call me the
okay.
way you want, honestly,
That's
right?
right. That's right. Whatever title you see fit.
Yes.
Jason, you're a manager now.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I'm an
So-
engineering manager, and I write how much code. That's
Engineering
right.
manager.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So Seb, you convinced some people, hey, we should bring this and work on this here under.
I did not convince them. I told them, maybe ask David, because if it was only me, they would have said like, no way, we can't do that. I won't work. I said, ask David. Maybe he would be interested. They asked David. He was interested. Turns out it was possible. That's a big nuance here. It's like, in order to be able to do it, we needed somebody they would trust.
I like it. Okay. And so then you moved to the US at this point
I was
to work
already,
on Babylon.
It was already.
Yeah, I was already
you were
in the
here.
US.
Okay.
But I was doing a bad job at what I was doing. So yeah, it's.
And by creating this team, we joined Gary. Gary was already working in that team on the GLTF, like we mentioned last time, on the GLTF committee and everything. So initially, that it was not the Babylon team, it was the GLTF team, precisely. We were here to support GLTF, and GLTF wanted a rendering engine. So we were there to support GLTF. And by just doing some smart manipulation across the board, we switched to Babylon.
By making you a PM, we made it all about Babylon.
Yeah, well, you know my political power, right? I can manipulate people's minds. So.
And so, Seb, you've been working full-time on Babylon for how long now?
I think it's 7 years now, if I'm not mistaken, because I did like 2 or 3 years in London, then half a year, and it's been, probably 6 or 7 years.
Another anecdote that is worth mentioning. When Join pinged me and get in touch with me the very first time, we were at Babylon probably 2 or not even 2. It was probably Babylon 1 something. One thing to know, and that Seb deserves all the credits for, is that at that time, the only system supported by Babylon was the standard material. I wrote all the shaders of the standard material, but we were not supporting PBR. Okay, PBR is already used by 99.999% of our system for a very good reason. It's the official and only material supported by GLTF, right?
Yep.
And that's a freaking amount of work, like to understand all the equations, all the optics rules and everything. And Seb is the father and only father of the current PBR implementation we have in Babylon.js. He actually managed to convince his team in UK, because they were writing the shader, they were starting the shader not outside of Babylon.js. He managed to convince them to allow him to port that to Babylon.js and let that open source, because initially it could have been something like, we remove it, it's closed source, but everything else is, that would have been a mess. Seb is the father, the foundational person why we have PBR today.
Yeah, and remember how we are done the first PR on it?
Yes, I remembered it. Oh, yeah.
By exchanging mail and zip file with David, who was doing the PR on my behalf.
I was not completely allowed to do it. So if you look in the history, I am the one
So you gave him the code
PR
under the table so that he could basically do it on your behalf? Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So
I am credited for that. I'm not. I did not do anything on that. I mostly validated the PR that Seb was doing.
So let me get this straight. So back in 2015, you're working behind the scenes in Xbox land, knowing nothing about 3D.
Yes.
And just several years later, you're such a 3D expert that you write the entire physically based rendering shader for Babylon.js.
That's
Did I get that
and
right?
the only tool in the market that allow you to debug WebGL as well.
Right.
You
just happen to learn this over the course of a year or two. No
So
big deal.
I would put a bit of change on this one. It's like I was totally no expert in 2015 at all on PBR. I was copy pasting things from native code to the WebGL one and hoping, crossing fingers, it would work. And when it doesn't, it's like, well, tough.
One of the big challenges we faced with Seb, I remember again, because of that reason, was the shadows. Like, we understood the shadow system roughly, right? But when it was going to the down equation and everything, we spent time with Seb, like looking, like staringly at the PDF file and looking at the equation, writing on the walls, like, the fuck is that, right? Until it worked. And I was like, okay, you know what? We will never touch that again. Until recently, when Alexi joined the team, the shadow code was like, oh yeah, sure, it works. Don't touch it. Don't look at it.
Just leave it alone. It works.
Yeah.
Just leave it alone. So Seb, you've been with Babylon for 7+ years. You have started from the ground up building some of the most important and foundational pieces of the engine. And today you function as the architect of Babylon.js. Can you tell us a little bit about what are your responsibilities and contributions to the platform and the team today?
I would say mainly today it's like oversighting any kind of contribution. I wish I would do more of personal contrib again, to be honest. I kind of miss this part, but it's more like oversighting any kind of contribution that is happening, ensuring that perf-wise we won't introduce anything that would harm some of the partner already using it. Same with back compat. It's basically everything where I know David would take a stick and probably beat me to death if I let them go in. So everything
only works like that. He's only afraid of me. That's why he's doing a good job.
That's why I moved back to France to be really far away. So I'm sure it won't happen.
I cannot throw something at him anymore.
And it's all about like, perf, simplicity, back compat, like ensuring all our pillars are always kind of fulfilled. Still trying to keep a high level of innovation and new features in what we are doing without leaving feature creeping going in, which is a really hard problem. I think that's the hardest part, which is from a PR, should we keep it or not? I want to please the community a lot, for sure. Like I want any feature from the community, but at the same time, you don't want too many features in the engine that will be used only in one use case, and it's sometimes hard to find the limit.
You can summarize Seb as the immune system of Babylon.js. Seb is the white blood cell of the system. He is there to protect the system against external aggressions, right? While letting entering everything else, right? So he is the barrier.
Yeah, I like that. I sometimes refer to Seb as the balance in the force. You know, we talk about in our mission statement of trying to create one of the most powerful, beautiful, simple, and open web rendering engines in the world. And balancing all of those things is an ongoing, never-ending, evergreen task. Yeah. And Seb has the unique responsibility of helping make sure all of those things are in balance and support of one another, that they live homogeneously together. And I think, Seb, it's not an easy task, right? We'll introduce a new feature, but we'll have to make sure that new feature, if we add it to the core engine, doesn't bloat the engine to the point where suddenly it's really slow for everybody. And as you mentioned earlier, we want to take in contributions from everybody because this is a community-owned platform. We want everybody to be able to participate in its creation. But at the same time, you have to recognize that if somebody wants some tiny little thing that'll only benefit them and maybe not everybody else, maybe it should be an extension, not a part of the core engine. Yes. You have to hold that balance and that tension, that unique tension. So it's not an easy problem. It's a tremendously difficult problem.
The good part is we've got an amazing team. So everyone in the team is also aware of it and helping on this task. I would do it alone. I would fail miserably at it if it was not for the team. Everybody is really looking into it as well. So now that's pretty much it on the contribution front. Like sometimes we will make just tiny changes to the PR to be sure that people can still do what they want without harming the system on the other side. And it's always those discussions between maintainability, perf, back compat, keeping the new features in, not letting the community down, and it's pretty fun.
Seb is also key when we look at the very complicated problem in the JavaScript world. Like literally today, every time there is a perf issue, we have a ceremony with Seb. We do a meeting together, right? We together open the Babylon.js code. We together open the current repro that is highlighting the current performance problem we are facing, and we die together. Like literally,
it's fun. I love it.
It's super fun when it's done, right? While we are looking at it and we find, okay, why the heck are these functions slow and whatever. But Seb is the only person that with me spend time on this very, very crux and central and very low problem. And so it would not have been something I would have been able to keep doing without him, right? Like literally. Yeah.
Remember the fat object one?
Yeah, right. Literally finding that some object. I wrote a post on that. Like when we are adding too much properties to an object in JavaScript, at some point, at a specific threshold, the JavaScript engine starts to de-optimize them. So now we know it, right? So we have a check in when you build a PR that we count the number of properties you have, and we keep you under the number of. But finding that, like literally, you look at the code, and it's slow, but you don't know why. Because nothing, literally nothing tell you why are you slow. You were not slow 2 PR ago, the same code. You just added a new property name, whatever, right? By adding that property, you become slow. And we are like, what is happening right now?
Because you have to know that there's a JavaScript optimization under the hood.
You don't, right? So with Seb, you look around, you scream, you say, I hate my job, I'm going to kill myself, right? We do that together. Fortunately, we do not drink alcohol, not too much, so that helps as well to keep...
I did for David.
Yeah.
He did.
And at some point,
one
of us, it's like a eureka moment, like, oh gosh, no. And then we find the problem, and we fix it, and we are super happy for the next 2 months.
No, and it's fun because the bug repro, when we declare the bug to discuss with the people at Google as well to help us on it and so on, I think the thing was, I'm a fat object equal true or something like this for the property name. And we were just adding this line inside of a mesh, and that's it. All Babylon was falling down in terms of perf.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah.
And it's powerful because you can discuss with the browser engine people, right? The one who write the native side of it and tell you, oh gosh, yes, we know it's a bug, but whatsoever. Or no, deal with that. And so we have to find a clever way to, for instance, for this specific bug, people looking at Babylon.js code may be surprised that we have property bags. So instead of having one property like for name, one for address, one for city, for instance, we have a property which is address. It's a bag with 3 property under that, and people are like, that sounds a bit convoluted, right? But there is a very, very good reason to that. So we don't overpopulate the main object, we delegate that. So you're gonna find inside Babylon code stuff that we call bags, like
because there's a specific number of properties that a JavaScript object can have, and if you pass that threshold, the system will automatically start to slow things down. Yeah, and so what you've done is you've grouped them together, so that if we need more, they'll be in little packages, property bags, so that we can stay under that threshold and stay optimized.
128 properties.
And it's completely unintuitive because you're thinking like, okay, I will create a level of indirection, because it's like if you want to access something, instead of doing mesh.something, you will do mesh.propertybag.something, which obviously would be slower for any sane developer.
And so 5 years later, someone come to the forum and say, you nuts, you the guy are just dumb stupid, right? Fortunately, Seb and I, we are still here to remember, the Muppets on our, we remember why we did that, right?
The old cranky Muppets.
Yes, exactly. That's us.
So, Seb, you function as the immune system, the balance and the force, as it were, to make sure all of the different focuses of the team are stable and supporting one another. But you also have 2 other really important jobs, which you didn't mention as well. One being you are a constant teacher, constantly helping people understand Babylon, learn Babylon. That's myself included. I call you all the time for help, but also on the forum. I think you've helped probably just about every single person on the forum in some capacity or another, by either directing to the subject matter expert or giving the actual answer or help or pointing to documentation, but you're there constantly to shape and help teach the community. And that's a really, honestly, a tremendously huge thing that I know everybody listening is very thankful for.
Yeah, it's also an amazing way for me to understand what we are doing wrong. Most of those questions highlights lack of documentation or people not reading it. It can go side by side.
Well, or sometimes us doing some shitty thinking and we need to revisit it as well, right? That it happens.
As well. And I love it because it's a really nice probe of, okay, what should we do next? Yeah. And when you read the forum every day, it's kind of shaping like, okay, this area, there are plenty of questions on it. We should either create more documentation, revisit it because it's too complex to use and it doesn't fit like our simplicity pillar and things like this. So and I enjoy it. Like when you read the forum, it's when you see messages like last time where people are telling that the community is the nicest and the friendliest communities they've been part of and so on. It's really rewarding as well. It keeps you going every day.
It's friendly despite the fact that you're there. I thought that's what you were going to go with.
No.
I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
And Seb works well with Patrick, that we should invite to the podcast as well very soon, because Seb has one problem. He knows the engine extremely well. And it's complicated then to abstract that from your mind where, okay, we are not the best judge for the simplicity of the API, right? And that's why
you know how it all works.
Yeah, right. Seb will be extremely technical and will explain exactly why every bit is where it is, but it pairs very well with Patrick, for instance, who has a end user approach. And so with these two people, like, we can definitely cover the entirety of the spectrum.
Yeah, well said. And Seb, the other job that you have in addition to kind of the balance and helping out the community and teaching is you also sort of naturally became, let's call it the point person or the kickoff person for key partnerships. So if you are a company or somebody who's really kind of trying to invest in adding Babylon into an existing product or redo a website using Babylon, you sort of became the point person to help kick off integrations of large projects that want to use Babylon in some way. And that's both internally in Microsoft as well as externally for other people or companies who are interested in using Babylon. And, most of the time, our hope is that the documentation and the forum function as two places you can go to self-service and get all of the information you need.
And most of the time it works.
And most of the time it works. But we do also recognize that there are unique complexities that we haven't encountered yet that require some clever problem solving. And you sort of became that point person to kind of say, hey, this group over here is interested in adding Babylon or web rendering into their product. I wonder what that's going to be like. They have some really unique problems. And so Seb is kind of the first point of contact to help kick that off and get them the information they need, or maybe a better way to say it is to get the ball rolling.
We call that the white glove approach, right? When we help some people handling the initial phase of thinking about it, thinking about their architecture, thinking about how they can integrate, and also identifying specific use cases that are not covered by the engine, where Seb will draw a line by saying, yeah, it makes sense, but it's not something that anyone will want, so let's work on your own code base. Or, oh gosh, that's something that everyone, maybe I can use an example and I will be the one getting fired if it was not allowed, but we are working with Bing Maps. So Seb, stop me if I can't say that. Seb, still good? Okay, well. Yes, okay, it's on me.
Still good, just keep going.
Yeah,
it's on you, yeah.
It's on me. So we are working with Bing Maps, and some of the contribution that Bing Maps wanted will be actually moved down to the engine. So at some point in time, we will be able to provide to the entirety of the Babylon users some feature that were developed specifically for Bing Maps that will then be moved down, thanks to Seb work, right? Because he's not just helping, he's also, and I like this sneaky approach he has to slowly move them to think that, oh, maybe you should contribute back, and then, right? And then now, with the legal being almost validated, being able to share that code with others, right? It's not just helping the partners, it's also helping the community back.
And so as you go in, as Seb goes in and creates these kind of custom integrations that have really unique, specific problems to solve. Sometimes new features, new inventions, new technologies emerge through that. And because Babylon is open source and the team is obsessed with making sure that it remains open source, we want to bring as much of those advancements and improvements to the broader community as possible. And that's one of the reasons that white glove approach is so important, is not only do we help a partner or a customer get off the ground, we also can take some unique technology and advancements to bring them back to everybody.
Yeah, I think that's the main reason of any of those white glove approach things. It's we always bring back something to the community after the fact. We kind of never did this with something where it's only an integration of what exists. It's always like, oh, there is this new problem that could help the community, and could be about like reducing the size of the bundle, could be about improving perf of one particular area and so on. And usually what happens is I will work on the integration part with them, take care of the Babylon side of thing while they take care of their side of thing. And we try to draw a line of, okay, where things are reusable for everybody else and where it's not. Everything which is not is mostly on our partner side. Everything that is will come back to Babylon. A good example as well was Node Material, David, for this.
Yeah, very much.
Remember, we started the conversation to help some of our partners.
That we won't name it because I don't know if we can.
Exactly,
we
can't.
Some external partners, not inside
external,
of Microsoft.
very high-level big partners who are using it. Yeah.
And we discussed it with David on like a quick call, like, oh, that would be amazing to have it. And I remember waking up like a couple days after, and David is like, okay, I've got it. It's already done. And you're like, well, shit, how is that possible?
Not the UI, just the core base, but yes.
Yeah.
But that was like, no, that was insane how fast it went at the beginning. Obviously, the 20 last % of it are always 80% of your time in terms of time consuming. But
we are
that's
seeing
how
the
the
same
feature started.
right now.
So we would not have NME today if it was not for some of the partners discussion we had early enough.
And I can extend that, Seb. I can extend that because the Babylon team will not exist today if Microsoft would not have been able to figure out. It's not that Microsoft is a bad company by any means, but Microsoft paying 12 engineers to work on an open source project without any ROI makes no sense, right? We are not living in the world of unicorns, right? So we have to have a reason for Microsoft to keep supporting the community. So it's a win-win, a 50-50 situation. And supporting partners, so internal partners this time, I mentioned Big Maps already, but we have countless others. It's also most of the mission of Seb, and that's also the reason why Babylon team inside Microsoft exists and why we can provide the quality and the support we are providing for free to the community, right?
Right. Yeah. Most people don't actually know this, but Babylon is not. It's not a Microsoft technology. It is an open source technology, not owned by Microsoft in any way. It just so happens that the full dev team is employed by Microsoft. And the reason for that is because Microsoft believes in both the altruism of let's make something that everybody can advance in, but also something that advances Microsoft's products and services as well. So it's as you put it, it is a win-win. I'd like to just quickly go on to something that's very, very complex, and I'm hoping we can keep it fairly high level. But to start off with, we have to go back to kind of why Babylon was originally created, which is my version that I tell people is suddenly the GPU is available on every device. Browsers get together and they say, hey, we want to allow web developers to access that GPU. And so they agree on this thing called WebGL. WebGL is this coding standard API that allows web developers to essentially write shaders and develop using the GPU. WebGL is a complex and convoluted language. There's not a lot of people in the world that are WebGL experts. There are some, but not a ton. So Babylon
and a lot are in our team already.
Yeah. So a lot of so Babylon was born as a means of creating an easy-to-use API that sits on top of WebGL that basically takes some of the complexity away from using the GPU through the browser. Okay, so that was in development over the course of 10 years. Over the last 2 years, Seb, you've been in active discussions with multiple browser creators, Google, Microsoft, Mozilla, all of them, Apple, for what is beyond WebGL. What is next? WebGL is not perfect. It's great, but it's not perfect. If we could reinvent the wheel and do something totally different with a totally new API to unlock more modern capabilities in the GPU, what would that look like? And we've been in development on something called WebGPU. So WebGPU is the next evolution of WebGL. And I'm wondering, Seb, if you can maybe, at a very, very high level, without getting too technically into the weeds, can you help us understand what is the fundamental promise of WebGPU and what it potentially offers us over WebGL?
If we have to summarize it in one word, that would be performances. It's all about performances and how they would unlock basically new ways of creating your rendering pipeline in order to reach tremendous performances that are not available so far to WebGL.
Today, if I may, WebGPU is lower in the distance between the metal, the driver, and the graphic cards. The distance to the WebGPU is smaller than the distance to WebGL. WebGL has extra layers to make it simpler, because WebGPU is far more complicated than WebGL.
I want to make sure you said WebGL is simpler.
WebGL, while being complicated, it's simpler than WebGPU. WebGPU is a monster. Honestly, WebGPU is a monster. Like, it's DirectX 12 versus DirectX 11. And when developers had to move from DirectX 11 to DirectX 12, they were all like, oh gosh, because you have no system to help you. But thanks to that, you have access to the very, very, very core power of your system.
And so two main things that I think really changed are the fact that in WebGL, every time you want to render something, without going too deep, every time you want to render something, you need to, let's do some setup, let's do more setup, and let's render something, which is like a lot of code, basically, for every single thing you're drawing on screen. Yeah. With WebGPU, as you've got more state, you need less of this setup, and they've got also an amazing feature they've added, which is like render bundle. It's not normally it should not be used for perf gains, but the fact is, basically, you can almost record this setup and the rendering part, and just say like replay. It's like record this, replay it. So instead of doing setup, draw, you would just do replay.
Per frame. Meaning, like, instead of doing that per frame, you can capture one frame and replay it by just changing.
So it's almost like telling, the GPU, hey, remember that you need to do this next time. Hey, you got to do, instead of me telling you the same instructions over and over and over again, it's do that thing we've already talked about. Yeah, because there is a huge cost when you go from your own code, your own bubble of a code, to WebGL. It's just like JavaScript going to native code within the browser and so on, and it just costs a lot. Yeah. So by not doing those calls, which are already costly, you can save a lot of extra performances. And it's also unlocking new features. Like until now in WebGL, compute shaders are not available. WebGPU really promoted this feature as a core feature, and it's available as soon as WebGPU is available on the platform. Compute shaders are available as well. Let's talk briefly about compute shaders if we can, because this is a pretty revolutionary idea for modern computer graphics, is geometry and compute shaders, and that's something that's
you can remove graphics actually. It's not graphics anymore. It's not graphics anymore. That's the thing. Right.
So let me summarize this, and please fill in the gaps where I get this wrong. But my understanding is that the CPU is built for doing many things sequentially, many operations over and over again, but with context for what happened before it. The GPU is built for doing billions and billions of operations independently or simultaneously, meaning what's happening over here on this side and what's happening over here at this time, they can be run at the same time, but they don't know what's happening to one another. And so if you think about this in terms of 3D, you can take a shader that animates, say, a sine pattern over a wave of, or a plane of vertices, and each one of the mathematical operations is assigned to each vertex, and the GPU runs them all simultaneously. I cannot query where is the position of vertex 1 at any given time while I'm querying where is the position of vertex 2. Now, compute shaders. Yeah,
if I may just before you go to compute shader, because I was witnessing something that changed a lot for me. I was invited long time ago, before Microsoft. I already created a previous engine, and I was invited by NVIDIA to present something at the GeForce context. It was like probably 15 years ago. So anyway, at that time, NVIDIA was introducing the first GPU. And they did something on stage that helped me forever understand the difference between CPU and GPU. What they did was the following one. They had a paint cannon, the one you can use when you are shooting on each other for, what's the name of that?
Paintball gun?
A paintball gun, okay? Yeah. And they have a engine, and that paintball gun was able to send a ball, right, of color on a white screen. And so they had the La Joconde painting. And so what they did with the paintball gun, gosh, it's complicated, paintball gun.
You can call it whatever you want. What would you say? What would you say in French? Paint cannon?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to speak in English.
One more time?
Paintball gun. Right, I got it. So what they did, they aim at 0, send one ball of one color, and then aim at 1, send one ball of one color. And so they did to paint the entire I guess, 256 by 256 image of the La Joconde. Okay, and they were like, okay, that's a CPU. The CPU can send one pixel at a time, and you can stop at any time, look the value of the previous pixel. If you want to adapt, the system can, okay. And then they came with a monster, like 256 by 256 paintball gun, all attached together. They push a button and right on the screen, they send 256 by 256 paintball balls, right?
Yeah.
And bam, the image was like there immediately. And everyone was like, oh, okay, that's what the GPU does. The GPU does everything simultaneously. But because it's simultaneous, every gun has no idea what the other gun will send because they send everything together.
Yeah. So in the world of geometry and compute shaders with modern computer graphics, you can have some context between. But now compute shaders open up something new. This is a new feature with WebGPU, and they allow you to do what? Simultaneous mathematical operations, computations, basically. Is that the idea? Yes. So what does this unlock for developers and artists?
Like you can think about physics simulation. Like we have a demo where we have a buoyancy stuff like floating on the water. Like simulating the water is a complicated equation to solve if you want to make it correctly, right? So this demo demonstrates that by default, if your CPU have to do that, the CPU will run at what, like 1 frame per day, right?
But the GPU, and it'll warm your house because it's going so fast.
Yeah, right. You're gonna warm your house, exactly. With a compute shader, actually, the shader will apply because every single droplet of water have just some influences for their neighbors, but they are not influenced by a droplet which is like 10 meters away, right? So by creating this data island, the system can parallelize a lot of stuff, and that's the compute shader.
Pretty powerful.
The thing is
crazy.
What we do so far when we don't have compute shader is you will use normal shaders to simulate those operations and store everything in a texture. But think about the overhead you've got. It's just like you will always do a triangle which renders full screen just to store all the data in something else. So you will have rasterization involved, all the output merger states, everything from your rendering pipeline involved. Whereas what you want at the end is just, let's do some mathematical operation on a buffer to get another buffer. With compute shader, you can remove all of this overhead of using colors instead of using floats for storage and so on. And yeah, it's a really nice way for anything which is computational intensive without rendering on screen.
And so, Seb, you've been behind the scenes working with these browser creators to not only define what the future of browser to GPU communication looks like, meaning you've been helping to define WebGPU.
The spec, yes.
The spec of WebGPU, but also you, along with Alexei on our team, were responsible for making sure that Babylon was one of the first engines to offer and continue to offer full support for WebGPU as it's become publicly available.
Transparent support. You can switch between WebGL engine and WebGPU engine without even knowing it.
Right. And so the way that you did this, Seb, is by basically keeping this architectural construct of Babylon is built on top of WebGL to make it easy to work with. We're going to let the exact same code, the exact same rendering code, hook into and now work on top of WebGL as well, WebGPU as well. So no matter what, your Babylon code does not change, but you can switch between which API you want the browser to use to communicate with the GPU, which is impressive.
And Alexei is the real crazy mind, I would say, in our team. So pop off for the one on the forum who knows Alexei as well, because he's answering a lot of thread.
Evgeny Popov is not Russian,
exactly.
But it means, I don't know why.
We would love to have him on the forum, but he's a little camera shy, so it might take us a while.
and yes, he's the crazy mind behind like that. Finishing this implementation, I really started just the first pieces with that was with the Google folks at the beginning. I remember having like a crazy meeting with them in Paris, and at the end we were able to render like a triangle. We're like, okay, that's a win. We can render a triangle that they on a browser that they provided to me on a zip file by mail, I think, or something like this, which is like, what is this browser version? It's weird, and it's really how it kind of started. And what we were providing to them was basically like a real use from people in the community implementing WebGPU.
Right.
And that helped shape the API from all the issues we found in terms of we can't use this, it's way too complex, or this API, it's really missing, it's something we use every day, please do something for it, because it's not relevant for us as dev to just rebuild this over and over and over again. And it was a really nice exchange with the people there, the people in the Edge team, Apple as well, and Mozilla. So yeah,
and it functions as the role that Babylon played, that you played, is really understanding a customer perspective, for lack of a better word. So you have the browser creators who are like, I'm going to create this API that theoretically could be more advanced, and you're coming in and saying, here's some real world data where a real engine used by real developers would actually leverage these capabilities.
With an existing code base, right? Because 3JS, Play Canvas, they are like us, right? They have a existing code base. They can simply snap their finger and change entirely their architecture, right? So we also try to bend them to say, hey, wait. You have a very long-term vision maybe in the future, but for now, we engine developers, we need X, Y, and Z to be able to transition, or in our case, to protect backward compatibility, right? It has to work the same way, like you turn on WebGPU, the scene does not change. It goes faster, that's it.
Yeah, well said. Very, very well said. So Seb, the fact that WebGPU was in development for so long, it's out now, it's here, it's available in Chrome, correct?
Yep. Yeah, it is.
And it's available in Edge and coming soon to Safari publicly.
I don't know.
Apple, man.
Yeah, the forbidden fruit. And so I just want to highlight that story that several years ago you got involved with the idea of, could the web be better for everyone? And here we are today, let's call it 3-4 years later, where basically it's now not just, it's past development, it's past definition, it's real. And so work that you directly have done has benefited effectively the world. And so I just wanted to put a little cherry on top, and I know how much you French people hate my over-exaggeration but this is true. This is true. You have helped, your work has helped make the world a better place. And on behalf of everyone, I just want to say thank you for that.
Nobel Prize very soon, just so you know.
Nobel Prize, yeah, absolutely. The only thing that's missing is
at least I think it deserves more. Just like
yeah. The only thing actually that's missing, Seb, is if you could just learn to play that guitar that's in the background there, then we'd all truly just think of the best of you. Yeah, that's the only thing that's just missing.
It's stuck to the wall. I can't take it from the wall.
It's not a real object that you have.
And I can't stand up because I don't have pens as well when I'm doing meetings, so I can't stand up to go there. Sorry.
Great. The real true hidden gem of Babylon podcast. Seb doesn't wear pants while developing. Great. Thanks, everybody. All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. Seb, honestly, on behalf of the entire Babylon community, thank you for everything you have done.
On behalf of the world.
Thank you for on behalf of the world.
At least. The universe. No,
thank you. Thank you for what you have done. Thank you for what you continue to do. And thank you for, I know what's coming in the future that you're going to do, which is future excellence. So on behalf of everyone, thank you, Seb. It's an honor to have you as a part of the team.
You're so welcome, Jason. Yeah, it's way too much, I have to admit. But
yeah, this is where my over-exaggerated Americanness.
It's our signature move, right?
It's basically almost embarrassing me. You see,
that's my goal. That is intentionally my goal. If you're turning red, I've done a good job. No, but thank you, Seb, for joining us, and David, thanks as always for being here with me. Appreciate it, and we'll see everybody next time.
Bye,
everybody.
Have a good day. Bye.